Okay, it is day 6 of the Power Skills pop-up series, and today is a Q&A day. So there's been several questions around empathy and what is the role that empathy plays in developing soft skills. I've had a couple of people who have said that they're empaths. How does it impact them? And what role does empathy itself play, whether you're an empath or not? And so I want to spend some time today diving into these questions. I kind of rolled them all into one, but I want to speak through several different of the power skills, right? And how empathy impacts each of these different power skills. So let's dive right in on that. So I'm Angela W. Stillwell, creator of Untapped Strengths and founder and CEO. And I work with corporations to transform their individuals into leaders and their teams into powerhouses. And I also work with entrepreneurs doing the same thing. So this empathy thing, let's chat about this for a minute. All right. So think about effective communications as one of the power skills that we're talking about. And I've alluded to effective communication several times this week already and what effective communications look like. But what role does empathy play in effective communications? So when you think about effective communication, we talked about building trust and that sort of thing. Using empathy or applying empathy in effective communications really helps you to better understand and relate to the other person or the other individuals, right? Or other people who are part of your team or part of your family, because all of these work within a family dynamic and a personal dynamic as well, right? It's not just from a business perspective, because these skills work whether you are doing something within your community or doing something within your home or doing something at work, right? So it allows you to better understand and relate to the other people. It also helps you better understand yourself and better relate to yourself. So you have this mutual process of understanding and relating to self and to others. And it helps you look at emotions. It helps you better understand the emotions that others are feeling as well as yourself. It helps you get a different perspective. What is the meaning that you're giving it, and better understanding the perspective of the meaning and story that they are giving to a particular situation. And then also it helps to better understand and relate to the experiences that others have had. So from an effective communication standpoint, empathy hits on a lot of different aspects, right? And let's talk about the active listening skill. So from an active listening standpoint, when you are feeling empathy for someone, it does allow you to do more of that active listening. What do I mean by active listening? I mean, really paying attention to what they're saying, using the other person's words to repeat back to them or to ask them a question, really hearing and listening to what they're saying and what they're not saying, really paying attention to their body language, paying attention to so many different things, right? So it helps to be more considerate and compassionate in the listening and responding rather than reacting. All of this being part of that effective communication. And then looking at emotional intelligence. How does empathy impact emotional intelligence? Well, on Tuesday on day 2, when we talked about emotional intelligence and the role that plays as a power skill, we did get into some of the empathy pieces of emotional intelligence. And when you use empathy then it helps you, as I mentioned a minute ago, it helps you better recognize the emotions in both yourself and in the other person. So, what that does is it helps you better manage and regulate your own emotions, as well as managing and regulating as much as one can someone else's emotions, right? By managing and regulating your own, you set the example for the other person. Now, doesn't mean you control the other person, because you absolutely do not. However, if you maintain and regulate, then it sets the stage for more of that to happen in conflict discussions, and when things can get heated, right? So you are perceiving and responding to others in a way that is impactful for them and not just for yourself. And then when you look at relationship building, what is the role that empathy plays in relationship building? Seems kind of obvious, but in relationship building, empathy helps build and foster trust. And understand something, trust has been deteriorating over the last multiple decades. They do studies on what is the level of trust out there among the public, among society, here in the US and in other countries. And it has been on the decline now for multiple decades, basically since the end of World War II. It's been on the decline, and particularly since the Vietnam War, since returning from Korea and then going into the Vietnam War, it has continued to decline. And decade after decade, there is less and less trust, because there is less and less empathy. And if you look at tribal society versus democratic societies, then there's this whole different dynamic, and that is played out. And reality is that all of us, every single one of us, if we get backed into a corner, if we are in a high conflict situation, then we all go back to a tribal way of operating, which does not have empathy. It doesn't have, actually, it does have empathy, but it also uses shame and guilt, which reduces empathy. And shame and guilt is a way that in a tribal society, and when I say tribal society, I am talking about the way that the vast majority of the world still operates. It's only in Western Europe, Canada, the United States, and some of Latin and Central America. But even in Latin America, that there are areas that still very much operate from a tribal, even though they don't call themselves tribes. If you think about what's happening with the drug wars and that sort of thing, they still operate in that, or not still, they operate in that tribal. There's a book called Rule of the Clan. I'll try to remember that book and share it with you all tomorrow during tomorrow's Q&A. It's a great book. It studies this whole tribal society versus democratic societies, and what happens and what the difference is, and why so often when there is a high conflict area, we have a really hard time in Western Europe, the United States, Canada, et cetera. We have a really hard time operating in these high conflict areas, because we don't have that whole tribal society way of operation. Now, not to say that one is better than the other. Those of us on this side, we believe in the democratic society, and it is a very good way. There are also good ways that are from the tribal. And so you have to understand, because the tribal society is the way that our reptilian brain, our amygdala, that's the way that operates. It is a survival technique, not a thriving process. And remember, I keep saying over and over and over again that our brains are wired for survival, not for thriving. Okay. So when you look at the relationship building, it fosters trust, it builds rapport. When you're using empathy, people feel valued, people feel heard, people feel respected. Okay. Valued, heard, and respected. And that respect piece is huge to the subconscious brain, to that part of the brain that is driving, like I've said, 80 to 90% plus of every decision made, every action taken, and every result getting. Every result that is getting. That, I don't know where that word came from. Every result that is attained. Okay, so when you think about it from that standpoint, it impacts how our brains receive and respond to different scenarios. Okay, so that's in the relationship building aspect and how empathy plays a role in that. Now, what about conflict resolution? What does that look like? What does empathy look like in conflict resolution? Again, it's approaching with a more open mind. It is seeking mutual understanding and mutually beneficial solutions. So when you're looking at conflict resolution, and I've kind of talked about that already, but when you're looking at conflict resolution, empathy plays a major role in it when you can have that mutual understanding with another person. Now, it's not that you necessarily agree with them, but you can understand, right? So this isn't saying that empathy means you absolutely agree with everything that person is saying. It means that you can feel, you can listen, and you can better understand what they're perceiving, what they're experiencing, what they're thinking, and what they're feeling. And again, it leads to trust. It leads to rapport building. It leads to feeling respected and heard. And then finally, when you look at leadership, what role does empathy play in leadership? So when you've heard me say already that one of my pet peeves is the people who are labeled as leaders, and they're not leaders. They don't act as leaders. They simply have a title. And the talking heads everywhere call them leaders, and yet they're not operating as leaders, because leaders do the things that we're talking about all this week and throughout this whole pop-up series. And so often the people who hold the titles of leaders that the talking heads use the phrase leader with, they are not doing these things. And when you do have empathy, and when you do implement these skills that we're talking about, these power skills that we're talking about, what happens is you increase engagement, you increase productivity, and you increase collaboration. Guess what that does? That builds a more cohesive environment, whether it's in your community, whether it's in your home, whether it is in the military, whether it is in an office environment, government, etc. So, use empathy in your leadership. It does not mean that you are weak, just like vulnerability does not mean that you are weak. You heard me say yesterday on day 5 that vulnerability, was it day 5? I can't remember now. My days are running together. I quoted Sigmund Freud, where he says that vulnerability is where you find your strength, right? So vulnerability, empathy, these are things that as true leaders, you lean into. And so I want to encourage you to look at this empathy piece, not just as an empath where you feel everything that everyone else is doing. What if you could manage that for yourself and then use just the empathy piece so that you could better recognize and better understand your own feelings and emotions, and better understand and recognize what others are feeling. So I'll leave you with that today. Again, if you are interested in doing a consult call, I would love to do that with you. They're 30-minute calls. It's It's not a sales pitch. It is absolutely just a conversation to see, how do these skills impact you? Where are you on that? And if you have not yet signed up to get the follow-up materials, make sure that you do. You can sign up at the link that you see on the screen, the bit.ly/power skills pop up, and make sure that you capitalize power skills pop up, the first letter of each of those words. You want to make sure that you capitalize those because that will make a difference as to where you go. So look forward to hearing from you. You can DM me, you can put it in the comments, either way, and we will follow up on whichever platform you are watching this. I believe we are on LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook, and I can't remember where else. So let me know if you are interested in having those calls. We'll get you a link so that you can get scheduled. And I look forward to having those calls with those of you who have already signed up. And I look forward to sharing additional information with you tomorrow from a Q&A standpoint. And then Monday and Tuesday, we will dive in a little bit more on a couple of other power skills. So have a great weekend, and I will see you back tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.